Hey there, I'm Dominique St-Pierre. You're listening to Go Podcast. Today I will talk a bit about interfaces and refactoring in Go. Hello Gophers. This will be a kind of a different episode this time because I was looking for a topic and I'm really excited these days about a refactor that I'm doing in static backend. So I will be talking about that today. So basically using interfaces to help with major refactoring of your code. So let me give you a quick background history of static backend. So static backend started as a private SaaS. I built that in 2019. I was wanting to build a Firebase alternative and wanted to offer a paid hosting for that. But the goal was to be able to go out of the platform and self-host the application itself. So long story short, I open sourced it due to lack of traction with the paid SaaS. So I've decided to open source this. This is a passion project of mine. So this is starting to shape really nicely, in my opinion. But one aspect that was not great about it, I was using MongoDB, and frankly, all of the code base was tightly coupled with MongoDB everywhere. So for instance, I had, a lot of places everywhere that was touching to the database, even the smallest code possible. It was like using the Mongo package and directly using, the find function everywhere. So yeah, it was not really provider agnostic, database provider agnostic, and I wanted to support Postgres, and because, well, first of all, it has been requested, and for lots of reasons, but yeah. This will be my story about how I refactored this code. Since I created that project as a software as a service at first, and I was not really knowing what would be the reach of the project, there was no really unit tests and whatnot. So the code was kind of just, it was an MVP-ish, and during the last 2 years, I really, since I open sourced it, I really tried to continue refactoring the code, adding unit tests and whatnot. So to me, that was really important to be able to extract an interface for the data persistence. So this is what I want to talk about and why I really enjoy interfaces in Go, but at the same time, I'm never really sure when to use them or not. It always seems to be after the fact that I realized that, well, I should probably be using an interface here. And also, I discovered that when doing refactoring like that, creating an interface just makes sense and is just the right way to go. So basically, I went ahead and defined all the functions that needed to be called to access the database. So for instance, creating document, reading document, querying the document, creating files and function, because static backend is a backend as a service, so it does not just handle the database. It do handles server side function, it do handle storage, it handles scheduled task and whatnot. So there is a lot of meta information that is also handled for your application. But the database part was kind of directly written. The logic was written directly in the web handler, if you will, so in Go. So I extracted all of that code. So the way I did that was that I started to list all the functions that needed to be implemented for a data persistence implementation. And since my code was already working for MongoDB, so I created this implementation first. So I just extracted the code from the web handlers and replaced that with a single line call to the function on the interface. And after that, it was just a matter of implementing that for Postgres SQL. And by doing that, I mean, first of all, to be completely frank, I had a really great time. It was the most funniest moment. I tweeted about that a couple of days ago. It was really, I don't know. It felt right, and I also created a test suite for MongoDB and Postgres at the same time by while doing the implementation. Why not create as well a full coverage unit test of all those functions? And yeah, it was really nice. So my experience so far with interface is mostly it's either I'm going to create them maybe for nothing, or they are not really needed if I do that too early in my project. Otherwise, I usually wait a little bit, and it is more clear when to use them or not. And another way to know for me is also, well, when doing you test as well. So probably for dependency injections and whatnot. So when you want to support different behavior in your test, for example, so that could be an example. So for instance, I'm using a caching mechanism. So basically it's Redis in production, but in my test, a simple map is all I need. So extracting an interface and now passing around this interface it kind of prevent your code to be tightly coupled with any implementation. And for an open source project or library, I think it's great because you never really know when you will need to implement something else. So you cannot really be sure that 100% it will always be Redis, or it will always be MongoDB in my case. And yeah, so what exactly happened when I created this interface was, like I was saying, the code just became really clean. And the way Go handle interface, so I guess you probably know, but let's say there is some newcomer to Go that listen to this podcast. So just quickly, you define some functions in an interface, and as long as you have a type that implement those functions, then it means that you are, your type can be passed around as the interface. So you just need to implement functions. It's really, really beautiful how they did that. And yeah, like I was saying, I don't think there is a good way to make sure that you are going to be creating the right interface at first. So that's why I tend to delay the creation of them as much as I can. Some good places to start creating interface are, when you have a type, and this type have a field of something that it needs to do. Let's say it might be It might be a call to an external services. It might be just a function or something. Let's say you have this type ABC and a field XYZ, and XYZ is of type function that accept a string and return a string. Then you could probably create an interface for that and pass. Let's say you have a new function that return an instance of your type ABC. Then you could receive an interface in this function, and when you create your ABC type, you could fill the XYZ property or the field with what you received, which is an interface, and your interface could be a single function, or it could be multiple functions and whatnot. So this is basically dependencies injection. It's very hard to explain that on a podcast, for instance, and I think I'm not doing a great job at the moment. But the point is, when you have a type that depends on something else, this something else is probably a good way, or the entire things that this something else needs to do. This probably is a good candidate for an interface. And another aspect is any kind of I/O, so input output. And I'm not talking about file I/O here. This is greatly done with the I/O reader and writer, but I'm mostly talking about let's say your application needs to call an external API. So that could be a good way to create an interface, because on your unit test you might not want to reach out to the outside world. So you might want to create an interface, extract the functions that will need to be called, for this API, and just implement a dummy or a fake implementation in your test. And that way, you could use that implementation in your test. So the way to use them. So it's one thing to create them, but you still need to understand a little bit about how they are, how they come to life. In my example, I was going to implement another database engine entirely. So how does the application knows which implementation to use? Well, to me, it's a simple environment variable that the consumer of my open source project needs to fill, and if they indicate that they want Mongo, then it will take the Mongo implementation, and otherwise it will take the Postgres. So there is multiple ways to tell your application how to do that, and which implementation to use. Usually you don't really need much, because you often have the interface into the input of some functions, and depending on if you are executing the code in production, then you pass a certain things, and if you are running that in your test, for example, then you could pass another implementation. So yeah, and you could have an implementation for unit tests. You can have an implementation for integration tests as well, and one for your production. So let's continue with our example of calling an external API. So your integration test could be that it is not calling the real API, but a mock API that you created yourself. And you still have a kind of a feel of calling a real thing, but still controlling all the flow between your test and the API itself. So that's another great way to know when to create them. If you want to see that in action, please feel free to look at the GitHub repository for static backend. It's static backend HQ /core on GitHub. And also, if you have a topic idea then for this podcast, then please reach out to me via Twitter is probably the best way. So Dominique St-Pierre, this is my Twitter handle. And on that, have a great time writing Go. All right, that's it for this week. I hope you liked the episode. And again, if you can share and talk about the podcast, that would be extremely appreciated. Also, if you want to check my book out, I have a course named Build SaaS App in Go. So it's at buildsasappingo.com. All right, see you in 2 weeks. Bye.